Chase, we have to come up with our Mount Rushmore for Hornets shooters. I've left the definition of shooters gray on purpose. But things that I am taking into account is essentially 3-point shooting, probably the greatest weight put on that. Free throw shooting is a factor. And then also just your mid-range shooting from around the floor. Any form of jump shot is kind of what I'm counting as shooting. Let's throw out some. Let's go some names. Have you got a name you want to start with?
So I think that while even especially considering the all-encompassing definition of shooter that we have right now, I think we would be remiss to not start this conversation off with Kemba Walker, by far the leader in three-pointers made in Hornets history. He has 1,283. Del Curry's second with 929. So we've got quite a gap there between first and second place. And obviously, one of the best mid-range shot creators of the mid-2010s. In his prime with the Hornets, could pretty much get a jumper off from any spot on the floor that he wanted. And especially in the later years when he really embraced like taking more threes, especially off the bounce, was just such a fun shooter to watch, on top of being extremely efficient with volume, tons of production, leader in three-pointers made, highest scoring game in Hornets history. It's got to be Kemba. Kemba is, if there were a Mount Rushmore, there would be three players on the bottom and Kemba would be standing above them looking down at the rest of them.
Interesting. So you have Kemba Walker for your Mount Rushmore on Charlotte. He's in contention. I don't know. 83% from the free throw line. You see, if you look at the percentages, he shot 36% from three in his Charlotte career, which when we talk about some of these other guys here, the percentage is way down, but you have to take into account that we're talking the highest usage of any of these guys by quite some way, probably. 83% from the free throw line, like you say, a great mid-range shooter. So maybe I'm putting too much weight on that 3-point percentage because of that mid-range shooting. But I think he is absolutely a candidate who has to be mentioned. Let's circle back. I'm going to throw out Davis Bertans, who we just talked about, so we don't need to go over those stats, really. If we're talking about pure shooters, if we're talking about off-ball shooters, he has to be right up there. I think he's shooting like 46% with the Hornets so far. Obviously, it's a pretty small sample size, but everything we just talked about, he is one of the best shooters in franchise history. Whether he makes Mount Rushmore, we will have to see. But he's another guy I'm going to throw out. Who's the next guy you've got?
So this is going to maybe reopen some wounds and pour some salt in it, but one of the most recent departures from the Charlotte Hornets is behind Kemba and Dell in third place in three-pointers made all time. Was very efficient as well. Had a ton of games where he's making 8-9 threes and really reinvented his career as a three-point shooter as soon as he got to the Hornets, and has since kept that up since he left. And that is one Terry Rozier with 864 threes made all time, shooting 37% on those. He's shooting 43.6% from the field. And especially in his later years with the Hornets, improved a lot as a mid-range shooter and shot creator as well. So I think Terry's definitely going to be up there. Another guy like Kemba that is at the very top of most of the jump shooting, scoring type of lists. Not so much the total points for Terry, but in terms of a three-point shooter, he was only here for 4.5 seasons, and he made his mark. That is for sure. So Terry is definitely one of the top shooters in Hornets history for me. Would definitely be on my Mount Rushmore.
Not on my list and not making my Mount Rushmore.
Get out of here. No, boo, tomato.
Right. Tell me right now, you think Terry Rozier is a better shooter than Troy Daniels?
Yeah. Yes.
Troy Daniels is a 48% three-point shooter. He was a absolute sniper. One of the original guys from part of Miracle After Midnight Part 1 in Sacramento. Leads the Hornets in three-point percentage. This is not best player. This is not best scorer. This is the Mount Rushmore for best shooter. And I think Troy Daniels beats Terry Rozier in a shooting competition from three, from the mid-range, 8 times out of 10.
Oh, I don't know. I may be in like an empty gym shooting competition, and even that's a maybe. In a game, though, if you were just like watching them play, shot difficulty weighed like pretty heavily onto this for me. Like obviously guys that are taking them like off the dribble and off a movement and contested and from deep range, like that has more value to me than someone like Troy Daniels, who was like a pretty much purely like an open catch and shoot guy. Not necessarily open, I got to give him some credit, but he could definitely hit difficult shots himself, but was definitely not an on-ball guy. And as soon as that ball went down for more than like 2 or 3 dribbles, the allure of Troy Daniels, I just combined him and Jaden McDaniels into one person, but the allure of Troy Daniels went down significantly as soon as the ball hit the deck. So that factors into it heavily for me. I can't argue with him being an honorable mention. That is for sure. I basically filtered it via percentage and total makes and just kind of cobbled my list together from guys that were on both of those lists. And Troy Daniels was there, but he would not be. He's an honorable mention of the honorable mentions for me.
Okay. Throw out your next guy.
So I think this one is obvious. I'm surprised we haven't actually talked more about him yet to this point, but Del Curry, obviously, has got to be on this Mount Rushmore, or at least be up for consideration for it. He was over 40% in his career. He was second all time in the franchise history in threes made with 929 in 701 games, which if you're considering the era that they played in, that might be the most impressive, was that he was averaging well over 1 3 made per game in an era where it was just not common to be someone that took threes at a high volume at all. And Dell, honestly, like has a claim to being like an originator of a guy that's like called like a 3-point shooter or specialist or anything like that. And obviously he birthed and raised 2 supremely excellent shooters themselves. One of them the greatest of all time in Steph Curry, and the other one a current Charlotte Hornet who honestly also might have an argument to be on this list in Seth Curry. If you take the career totality into consideration, there's a real chance that Seth is probably not on this top 4, but is in the 8 to 10
Curry
players.
Is top 10 in the NBA in 3-point shooting percentage in the history of the league.
I believe so. Career 3-point
He was at least at some point during his reign with the Charlotte Hornets. For his career, Steph is shooting 43% from 3.
Yeah. Like he is
482 games.
He is one of the most efficient players in the last like decade of basketball. And it's honestly gone way under recognized. Like he just really doesn't miss that many threes at all. Like for any team that he plays for, no matter what role he's in, he's really never had a time where that hasn't been like a supreme skill on that roster and within the lineups that he's in.
Do we think Seth has a better case than Dell? He is 43% for his career. He's 86% from the free throw line, Seth. That is compared to his dad, Dell, was 85%, so pretty similar. Now, I think Dell made 929 threes in his career with the Hornets. Obviously, it is a different era here, right? We are talking different areas, but Seth is averaging, 4.2 makes attempts a game, almost 2 makes a game. Are they both making it on this final list, do we think?
Honestly, yeah. Like I think I've got 3 of my 4 now already. And honestly, I think I've got my whole Mount Rushmore now. And with people we've already talked about. My number 1 guy's
not even on there yet. My number 1 guy we've not talked about.
Okay. Yeah, honestly, because I give
Glenn
Dale
Rice
huge credit for the era. Oh, that's so true. Yeah.
Glenn Rice.
Can we make it 5? Yeah.
44% as a Charlotte Hornet, right? 508 threes for the Hornets, so that's a pretty good volume. It's just under half. He was there for very few seasons. 85% from the free throw line. Here's the thing: 25% usage, and if you take into account the era, right? 3-point champion Glenn Rice. How many of these other guys on this list can claim to be 3-point champion? I think Glenn Rice has to be on the Mount Rushmore. I don't even think it's a question. You talk about the volume, right? The usage, the mid-range, the free throw stuff, like the accolades at All-Star. Glenn Rice has to be on any Mount Rushmore for a best shooters of all time for the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, I think he talked me out of it. Winning the 3-point contest probably weighs more than it should for me, but especially back then, and being a player that was that productive of a 3-point shooter prior to 2010, basically, I think should and does weigh like a lot because those guys just were not like normal, and it wasn't like something that teams were seeking out. You had to prove to your coaches and your front office and your teammates that, like, yeah, it's worth, maybe not working the ball into the post to this guy that's 7 feet or something like that. And we can let you shoot from 28 feet or 26 feet or wherever it is instead, just because you're so good at it. And like guys like Dell and Glenn Rice, they were the exception to that rule, and they were good enough at it for their teams to be able to kind of construct their play style around them. And it worked, like, clearly for Glenn. Yeah, I think Glenn Rice, Del Curry, Seth Curry, and Kemba is my Mount Rushmore now. Terry is really, really hurts me to not put Terry, but I think
we were also missing one player who won the 3-point contest twice back to back in 07 and 08. Jason Capono.
Oh my God, he was a Bobcat. I totally forgot about that.
We are missing Jason Capono, who played for the Bobcats.
See, he didn't come up in either of my search filters either, which is pretty wild.
He's 41% from 3 as a Hornet, 82% from the free throw line. Obviously, had a pretty short stop in Charlotte, okay, and is like most people in this probably didn't even forgot like he was ever played for the Charlotte Hornets. But again, this was at the time probably not recognized as the best shooter in the NBA for probably a period of 3 to 5 years. He couldn't do anything else, but he had a role as just the best shooter in the league. This is why this conversation is hard, because like obviously the Mount Rushmore, you have to have a little bit of legendary status. So like if we were to split Dell and Seth, I think I would lean Dell for the longevity in Charlotte. Just the amount of career made threes in Charlotte, and also just the era, right? If he played in this era now, he would probably that 3 number would be double, the usage would be higher. So I think I have to leave Dell just at the longevity. I think Glenn Rice has to be on there. We talked about Jason Richardson. He was another guy who I came up just to throw out another name. He was a 3-point. Did he win it or did he just compete? He was a slam dunk champion.
I think he won the dunk contest and only ever competed in the 3-point contest. Yeah. Shout out to
He's an honorable mention
participating in the All-Star events while being like a borderline All-Star player. We need more Jason Richardsons in the world these days.
So your Mount Rushmore is Dell, Kemba, Glenn Rice, and who's your 4th guy?
I feel like I need to put Seth just because of the efficiency is like legitimately remarkable among even players that have played in an era where 3-point shooting is the most popular thing to do and become good at, thanks to his older brother. But I think I probably will be like you, and I'll split the Curry family into 2. I'll only name one of them just because they would dominate any all-time shooters list, really, if you were able to include the whole family. I'll go Del Curry, Glenn Rice, Terry Rozier, and then, like I said at the beginning, I still got Kemba Walker at easily the number 1 just because of what he did. He did all of it for Charlotte. That's the thing, too, is a couple of these guys and some of the guys we've talked about didn't do really all of it or even any of it. In Jason Capono's case for Charlotte, Kemba did all of it for them. And that was like the beginning and kind of the end of his career as a player and as a shooter. It all happened in a Hornets uniform. And I think there's something to be said for that.
So I'm going to go Kemba, Dell, and Glenn. Then I'm going to reserve one spot for one of these role player 3-point specialists. So you tell me, out of Capono, Troy Daniels, Davis Bertans, Seth Curry, which one of those 4 should I be giving the nod to?
I got to give it to Seth, or it's always fun to give the shiny new players credit, Davis Bertans. I'd probably go with either one of them. And maybe Bertans will just not miss for the rest of the year, and then he'll prove us, and he'll have to be on this Mount Rushmore. He'll just go like 100 for 100 to end the season. Wouldn't surprise me. His
shot diet, it certainly seems more difficult than Seth's. Like they aren't running kind of like these out of timeout plays for Seth Curry. They are doing it for Davis Bertans, and his ability to shoot over guys at his size. I'm going to go Davis Bertans because we've had a lot of Bertans talk this episode. Obviously, I know the volume, but like if we're just talking like aliens come down, the Hornets have to put forward the best 4 shooters of all time to win in a shooting contest that involves mid-range, free throws, 3-point. I'm feeling pretty good about Glenn Rice, Dell, Kemba, and Davis Bertans. I think that's my 4.
There we go.
We've got our go back to Miami.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, hey, we give him another year in this uniform, who knows how high he would have gotten on. I mean, he probably would have passed Dell. He would have been second all time in 3-pointers made. I believe he finished as the 10th scorer all time as a Hornet. The man was not here for very long, and I think he's like 10th in blocks or something as well. Like, he's just all over the Hornets record books thanks to that sign and trade for Kemba Walker. So hard to leave Terry off these lists, and also because he's very cool. So
do you think in 5 years' time, if we have this conversation again, that Brandon Miller's part of the conversation?
Absolutely. If the volume maintains and the efficiency is about around the same, I don't see why not. I mean, like, look at what Terry has. He had 5 seasons with Charlotte, 298 games, 864 threes. And if you just go and look at the most 3-pointers made in Hornets history by player, it is almost exclusively people that were on the team at the start of the season. Like, Terry is 3rd, Miles Bridges is 5th, PJ Washington is 6th, LaMelo Ball is 7th. And then 3 spots below them, there's Devontae Graham. Like, Kelly Oubre Jr. comes up on this list. Gordon Hayward is like in the top 20 with 245. Pretty much everyone that's in the top of the Hornets 3-point made list is somebody that played somewhat recently. So if Brandon Miller is, going to maintain this volume and efficiency, I wouldn't surprise me at all if he's near the top of this list, much less on it in 4 or 5 years.
Be interesting to see. Nick Smith Jr., also outside chance, maybe. We've seen some of his shooting so far, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he is, if you had to talk about 3-point shooting and mid-range pull, he's like, those are 2 things that he can absolutely do. I don't know about everything else, but those 2 things are NBA skills. So shout out to the best Hornet shooters. I would put the best Hornet shooters of all time up against like a lot of other franchises. This team's not been very good over the years. But if you had to do a shooting competition, putting forward your 4 best guys in history, I feel like the Hornets would be a pretty good spot.
Yeah, they would definitely have. I mean, just so many like of those like role player types have come through and spent like a half a season or a season in Charlotte. That like you can pull a Troy Daniels, a Jason Capono, like and even the bigger name guys too were pretty good with the volume and efficiency that they had. Yeah, that would be a fun exercise to gather like all 30 NBA teams shooting like all-time shooter Mount Rushmores and like pit them up against each other. I would imagine, honestly, that the Hornets are near the top of that list. Do you think there's a case for LaMelo Ball to be on this Mount Rushmore? We didn't even think about that. But do you think that he has a case, or is it probably too early still?
No, because of the pull-up shooting.
Okay, yeah.
Like, for me, he has no mid-range pull-up game whatsoever.
Yeah, that's true.
That's where he falls down compared to some of these other names that we talked about. From the 3-point line, the free throw line, yes, absolutely. But if you're talking about versatility, that is the area that hurts you.
Yeah, I'd probably have to agree with that. The 3-pointers, obviously, like the difficulty and range compares to very few players in Hornets history. But yeah, the lack of ability to pull up once he steps inside the arc.
Would that not be the best all-star 3-point like twist? Where you have to pick one player from your franchise from the last 4 decades, okay? And you put them forward as a team of 4 in a 3-point shooting competition against other teams. Like, can you imagine seeing Kemba, Dell, Davis Bertans,
that would be
Alonzo
awesome.
Mourning, like all going out there and like doing a team 3-point shooting competition? Like, that would be, I know obviously people but like watching old guys do sport is still like fun. You're like, oh my God, he still got it. Or in some cases, they really don't. So that would be a fun little twist to see at some point.
Yeah, either way, that would be entertaining. So I support this idea.